Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are on the globe. Hi, Donna. Good to see
Hi,
you.
I'm so happy to be here.
I am very excited that you're here. Everyone, very delighted to introduce today's guest. Technically, today is the last session of the summer series, which we're dedicated to shining and tanning, for those of you who had the sun, with confidence. And I know the topic that we're going to be diving into, self-confidence, what success looks like. We are on for a treat, everyone. So without further ado, Donna, would I be okay to share a little bit about yourself?
Hi. Well, I'm just happy to be here and I loved meeting you and I have loved our conversations, but I am an executive coach. I spent 30 years in corporate America and I had a very successful career, but I never felt completely successful. And that's why I wrote a book called Unsuccessfully Successful, because despite looking like I had everything together on the outside, my inside was never really matched up. So I'm on a new mission as a coach to help as many people as possible.
Yes, and I mean this is so interesting. Obviously, I love that we managed to be in touch together because I literally had this conversation even yesterday with a friend at the park when it comes to the definition of success that sometimes gets imposed on us. I mean, there are so many variations and variables when it comes to what success looks like. So first things first, I'd love to know more about what potentially made you make that change, from those 30 years in corporate to the mission that you are on today, before we dive into the
You know, I am a single mom. I raised my two kids on my own, at least financially, I would say. And really, primarily, I was their main caregiver. And I came from a very driven, successful family, and I loved what I did. But I gave my notice 5 times in my corporate career. I had a count when I wrote my book, and I left twice and I came back.
Wow.
And so people aren't doing those sorts of things if they're completely aligned with what they're doing.
True.
But I didn't think I had a choice and I didn't believe in myself enough. And I didn't know what the root cause was for my unrest. And at the end of my corporate career, I started not being able to digest food, or at least my favorite foods of salad. Not my favorite, by the way. I like food, but I ate a lot of salad, and I couldn't digest it. And so
Wow.
my body finally was saying, like, enough's enough. And it wasn't paying attention to burnout, not sleeping, stress. It wasn't paying attention to anything else. And I think my body was just trying to find a way to actually have me pay attention.
Mm.
And the timing was right because my daughter was graduating college and my son had already graduated. So the timing lined up that it was time. And I think it was time for my company and time for me. So I think that, the universe aligned.
I love that. And I think it's a very important point you're making. Obviously resonates with me personally with what I went through with burnout, is when the body starts to speak to you, because apparently we are not listening to the mind, which I find it fascinating, not necessarily in a good way, but at the same time, at least there are other layers that are going through if the mind is not being listened to. The one question I have for you, though, I know you've mentioned you've sent your resignation letter 5 times and it happened 2 times. So what happened the other 3 times?
Well, I work for a great company. I have no regrets about my
Mm.
corporate career, and they always found other positions for me because the other thing about me is I'm a constant learner.
Mm.
So sometimes I would get bored in my job or it was just too much, and they always found other things for me to do. And I coach women. I just coached somebody yesterday who said she's ready to leave her company. Now I've coached her through a couple of job changes,
Okay.
and she likes this company. She likes the CEO. And I said, have you actually talked to the CEO about staying there in a different capacity? And I think a lot of people miss that step, that they may be done with their current position, but you don't know unless you ask or create other positions. And one thing my company was amazingly good at was finding me different roles.
I love that.
So, yeah. So, and I mean,
Sorry, carry on.
no, I'm done.
I don't know if you came across the term job crafting.
No.
Essentially, it came up with Vicky as part of the podcast. But essentially, job crafting is that you are hired for a given role, a certain constraint in terms of the responsibilities you're having, your perimeter, and so on. And essentially, crafting your job means you're doing exactly what you were hired to do, but you're crafting it in a way that you make sure your daily routines and activities involve things that you are passionate about, that you like to be doing. So you're crafting role and your journey in the company, if you'd like, in a way that works for you. And I feel like a lot of people, like you were saying, sometimes have the external expectations that because they were hired at a given time to do a given thing, or they had the promotion at a certain time, they have to stay in that box in a way. So I love what you've mentioned with your client and what you work with her. The next question I have for you then is, looking at those 30 years of corporate life and where you are today supporting your clients, what's your relationship with success?
It's different now. Um, I think I did all the things, right? I went to college. I got my first job. I interned at an ad agency. I got a job there full time when I graduated. Actually, I took another job that it didn't feel right, and I did not take it. So I always been a big believer in intuition, always. And then my definition of success was, how high can I get? How much money can I make? How many things can I acquire? What status symbols are important to me? And I lived in a town where that was just sort of the game. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean, there's nothing wrong with the American dream. But when you're so out of alignment with who you are as a person and what you are valuing, it causes like a lot of unrest in your body and soul. I had all the things. I had a nice house. I lived in a nice town. My kids went to overnight camp. I drove a nice car. We went on vacations, but it was never enough because there's always somebody who's doing better, more than you. And
so the race keeps going.
So I just never was able to just say, this is enough. Like, I'm good, and I think I always wanted to make my kids proud of me. So I never wanted to say I had enough. But I think my son finally, he said it to me twice. Once when he was young, he said, it's been enough time being my mom. Because I was on, he might have been 7 or 8 at the time. I changed the age all the time, but he was young. And I remember exactly where we were sitting in my house on the stairs. And I gave my notice. I went to a company and I hated it and I came back. So that was one time. And then when I finally left, I was working on a project that I never should have been on. That was another role that my company found for me. And it was the worst alignment of my skills to the job that ever happened. And we all knew it, right? But we had to finish the integration. So my son, I came upstairs, he was upstairs and he looked at me, he said, Mom, this is not normal. You need to give your notice. But it wasn't like, Mom, like, I need you to make me dinner. It was like a deep knowing. And I did. I gave my notice that day because I was like, I can't do this anymore. So my definition of success has changed now to mean freedom.
Interesting. Okay.
That was long-winded. Sorry about that, but it was just...
No, don't be silly. No, it was great. And I mean, I'd love to have your views, because the way I see it when it comes to success is that it's not one thing. It's not a car. It's not a promotion. It's not a salary. It's evolutive as you evolve as a person.
Right.
And I think what gets confusing, because I think sometimes, and then myself included as human, we like the certainty of things. We like putting things into boxes. It's easy when it's organized. And accepting the fact that actually things can change, things can evolve, include that element of unknown that we're like, oh, how am I dealing with that? But I feel like accepting the fact that who you are today and your definition of success today might not be the same as tomorrow is actually okay. It can alleviate so much of the pressure. Do you feel that potentially success for you and your definition of success today is freedom will remain the same, or do you feel like it might evolve as well as the years pass?
I think I'm open to change. I'm open to a different definition. I'm not sure I ever want to let go of the definition of freedom.
Yeah, just full disclosure, everyone, Donna lives in an amazing area where she is pretty much free among an amazing piece of nature. So that's a side story.
Yes, that is a side story. But I don't know that my definition of success was ever wrong. I mean,
no,
I think
exactly.
I didn't want the American.
It worked for you back then.
It worked for me. It did. And I enjoyed so many aspects of my corporate career. And I just want to say, I was successful. I
Mhm.
got promoted. I worked on big accounts. I managed and mentored people. I made a lot of mistakes too, but that's how I learned and grew.
Mhm.
So I'm proud of my definition of success. And I think it's perfectly okay to change your definition as you evolve and are in different seasons of your life. Being an entrepreneur is not for everybody because of what you just mentioned, which is that uncertainty. I'm responsible for my paycheck. There's something beautiful about getting a regular paycheck and benefits. But I also feel like my dad passed away. I know I've talked about that a lot last year. And I spent 50 days with him, uh, his last 50 days with him, my brothers and I. And if I was in my corporate job, even if they said to me, you can take the time you need, it would have still been hanging over my head because I'm a highly responsible person and I
Yeah.
care. But with my own business, even though I wasn't making as much money at the time, I had the freedom to just take care of him without worrying about anything else, really. And that was beautiful. So this is a different season in my life when I get to do that.
I love the fact that you talk about seasons of your life. So we see we've talked a lot about success, and thank you so much for sharing your own journey as well. Let's talk a little bit more about the title, Unsuccessfully Successful. What does that mean, Donna? Tell me everything.
Tell me all the things. Well, it's funny because I had started to write as part of my coaching life, and I signed up
Okay.
with a business coach out of my training 4 years ago, and he
Yeah,
said you should write a email every week. Emails are a great way to stay connected to community and build your business. And he
agreed.
said, I want you to write 3 times a week. And I'm like, I just came out of corporate America. If I send an email 3 times a week, I will be unsubscribed because everybody's dying in a sea of emails anyway, or drowning. So I did it once a week, every 2 weeks.
Okay.
I did that. And so I started to write. People started to notice my writing and they're like, hey, it's not bad. Have you ever thought about writing a book? And I was like, no. But then a friend of mine who I met online, like you,
Sorry for
um,
interrupting. What were those emails about? Were there specific themes, or were just what were
just
coming
yeah,
up to
that's
you?
such a good question. They were not business related. They were more like
Okay.
how I'm feeling and how
Mindset,
coaching.
spirituality,
I
and
wrote a
things
lot
like that.
about grief because of my
Mm.
dad, and I
Yeah.
wrote a lot about my journey from corporate to entrepreneur. But they weren't
Nice.
very businessy. They were more
Yeah.
like, here's a story about my life, and here's how it may apply to you. And they
Yeah.
were
That makes
short,
sense.
maybe 300 to 500 words. So
Okay.
I really felt like it was pretty cathartic experience. Thank you for asking that question. I feel like there were more feelings. I feel like
Mm.
I finally was able to feel vulnerable and share. And I was able to do that and connect to my readers because I did that. And that was not how I connected in my corporate life. Because
Mm.
I was a senior executive. So as passionate as I wasn't very vulnerable.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Interesting.
So anyway, I signed up with a program through Georgetown University, which I highly recommend, called Manuscripts. And it's Never Write Alone. And it's a year program. So you talk to the founder, you're in the program for a year, and it keeps you accountable. And as a coach, I needed that because I was not going to write this book on my own. So every week it was like a class, a certain amount of words to write. And the book was going to be called Silly, Say It Like It Is, because that's my brand. And also, I don't think there's enough levity. So it was a double meaning. Like, how much fun do we actually have in our lives? Everybody takes themselves so seriously, myself included.
Mm.
So I liked the double meaning. And then I had to write my biography for the book with my editor. And I wrote Donna Starr was unsuccessfully successful for 30 plus years. And I was like, huh. And she's like, huh, I really like that. And I changed the name of my book at the last minute.
Love that.
So it just means to me that we get to define what success means for us.
Okay.
And for me, it always meant money, having a certain status. And now it means so much more than that. And I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm glad that I have evolved and that it means more than that now.
I love it. You mentioned so many different things in that. First of all, the vulnerability piece, how to say with a French accent. How comfortable do you feel about being vulnerable nowadays?
I actually think very, you
Okay.
know, um, I was not comfortable before because I was worried about judgment and what will people think of me. And there's a part in the book that I wrote about my childhood that I was like, ooh, should I put it in? Should I not put it in? And I ended up putting it in. So I feel like that's sort of my brand. And not only that, everything's better out than in. Thank you to my
Mhm.
mindset coach, Tracy Litt, for that line, but it stays with me all the time. That means emotion, that means words. I follow the holistic psychologist, and she said that whole don't say anything unless it's something nice is BS, because what you don't
Mhm.
say actually it is like a parasite in you, because it just builds up all this plaque like in your teeth. Like you got to say the things. So for me, it's super important to be vulnerable. And I think from somebody that wants to work with me, they know who they're getting. So I'm not trying to project an image of this perfect leader. I'm just trying to project an image of who I actually am, that I've had all these experiences and I can help people. But coaching, like a relationship, it's a partnership. So that either I work for you or I don't. But you will know a lot about me before you make that decision.
Yeah, and if I may extend on that, I've always said to my client that your career and your role and your job is like a relationship as well. And sometimes, whether you realize it or not, you sometimes end up in a toxic relationship, as in at work, toxic environment, or manager, or team colleagues, or whatever that is. Or like you were saying, being just thrown in a role that you know is 100% not tapping into your strength and skills, and you're just miserable, but you ended up there anyhow. Like any relationship, you get to decide what you want to put in there. For anyone listening to this who potentially is in a full time role or even running their own business, what advice from your experience would you give them when it comes to making sure they stay in touch with who they are? And like you were saying, not necessarily being afraid of saying the things like they are or even being vulnerable.
It's so much different today than it would have been, and this will sound funny to you, but you know,
You
you
can
and
answer the two versions. You can answer Donna of the present and Donna from 30 years ago.
I think you and I are in similar, we help similar people, right? But and I have 34 years of experience in talent acquisition. I worked for Monster.com and an ad agency that focused on human capital and hiring and software. So I really believe that I understand the whole recruiting process and how to present yourself. Um, I think a lot of people apply for jobs because they think they need a next step, because they think they need to grow. And that part is true, but I don't think people check in with themselves enough to say, is this really what I want? And sometimes I just slow people down. So if somebody comes on a session with me, and I just talked to somebody about this the other day, I may stop the session and say, hey, can we just breathe for a minute? Because I get people like me that come on and like, that's me, So I think one of my managers called me the Tasmanian devil. I don't think I am anymore, but I just go. And
Yep.
sometimes I think you just need to stop
Mm-hmm.
and really check in and say, or I have a lot of women, I coach men and women, but I have a lot of women that may not apply because they don't have, and this is very well documented, they don't have every requirement in the job description. Now, by the way, whoever writes job descriptions, there's such BS in a job description that I
It's a wish list. It's a letter to the Santa Claus,
oh
right?
my God, it's something like if it's a CFO or a financial controller and they ask for like 20 other things that are outside the main goal, apply for the silly job. Apply for it. You are qualified. You do that job today. So don't pay attention to the job description. Pay attention to the job title and whether or not you are capable of doing that job. The third thing I would say is expand your view, especially in this economy. What are your transferable skills? So one is to pause, two is to not get caught up in the job description, and three is transferable skills. I almost had a brain cramp there, but I caught
It's
myself.
all good. It's all
But
good.
like if there aren't any jobs in recruiting right now, which right now recruiting and marketing jobs have, kind of tanked because of the economy, at least in the US. So if you've been in recruiting, you're a salesperson, you're selling the company, you're selling the job, you are assessing talent. I mean, there's a lot of transferable skills there. So those are three tips that I have. I hope that was clear.
100% clear and very practical. I like that. I want to move back to the unsuccessfully successful, obviously, the whole book that you write about. And there we go. And for anyone who is struggling with their own definition of success, because I've seen myself there, I've seen myself lost between like truly understanding what I wanted, as in listening to myself. But I was not even able to do that because I was not able to cut the noise from external influencers such as society overall or the culture, or even external factors like my friends, my families, my environment, my colleagues. So would you have any recommendation for anyone who knows that they're not where they're meant to be, who knows that there is something else for their life that would make them happy and therefore successful on their own terms, but they just have no idea how to get started and listen to what that means to them?
That's a loaded. I needed to take a deep breath on that one. It's not uncommon. In fact, two of the women that are in my group program that starts today have written that on their intake form. They don't know what to do next. They don't know what fulfills them. They don't know what makes them happy.
And that's the problem of a lot of my clients as well,
Yeah.
100%.
So first, I want to find out a little bit more about them, like what their passions are. And I think values has a lot to do with matching. So if you are a climate person and you really care about the environment, you probably don't want to go work for an oil company. So sometimes I start with values, like what's important to you at a company, because all companies have the variety of jobs, right? I mean, so, we're in marketing, sales, finance, there are like buckets of jobs. So maybe I try to move away from the job itself to try to find the company itself or the type of company. So do you want mission driven? Do you want small business, entrepreneurial startup? Do you want Fortune 500? So I try to at least start to bucket them into the type of environment they want to be in. And that's a starting place for values, because I do believe people do better when they're aligned with their values.
Absolutely.
Tell me what you would how you handle that, because I always like to learn and grow too.
So first, by the way, everyone, I think I've mentioned that and you mentioned that to me, but I don't know if I've mentioned that to you, Donna. My number one value is growth. So I think this is why we very much connected on that. It's always about learning and growing and evolving. Anyone who isn't sure on where they should be starting, like you were saying, I feel like values is a fantastic exercise. I use it too because it's like a compass. You cannot go wrong if you start with yourself understanding the values that you care about, and then see to an extent you can match those personal values with either the company values or the environment or whatever, how much of a match you can make. So I would completely agree with you on that. The other thing I would also say is that it has to involve some level of introspection, because of exactly what I said with the external factors. And everyone is different when it comes to introspection. For some people, it might be, I know I love writing things down. For some people, it might be a meditation. For some people, introspection means speaking with another person because they're just very much extrovert and they like to hear themselves thinking out loud. So whatever it is, find a potential avenue and channel that you can use to explore those reflections. I think a lot of people also put a lot of pressure on themselves to get it right. Whatever that next definition of success or that next role should look like, they have to get it right. Well, spoiler alert, you don't have to get it right, in the sense that you are allowed to, first of all, expand your horizons and understanding the variety of options that are available to you, and assess from each of those options what could work, what couldn't work, before making the decision of picking one. So yeah, I would say that that's the first thing that comes to mind. I don't know, what are your thoughts on this?
No, I love that. And, I think what you said that resonates the most with me, or certainly all of it resonates. But one thing that, and if anybody's listening to this later or now, is you don't have to find the thing. I mean, and that is like, a lot of people come and say, I need to know what my next job's going to be. I need to know. And the thing is, it's like lateral movements, trying new things. In post-COVID, I do think COVID did a lot for us. We don't have to worry as much about gaps on our resume, because some people, and by the way, if you have a gap on your resume, who cares? And if you feel like you need to stay in a job X amount of time. Now, this is not me saying I recommend job hopping. Do not. And if you have 20 jobs on your resume at 30, I'm going to say, what's going on here? But if you have 5 jobs on your resume, I'm going to be like, hey, this person's exploring and they haven't found the right
Yeah.
fit. And that's what a good interview will uncover anyway. But finding the thing just is so limiting. Like, are we looking for the needle in a haystack, or do we just want to find more experiences along the way? And once you give yourself some latitude, you can breathe, because so many people come to me pinched like, I got to find a new job. I need to find one right away. Now, I understand that if you have to feed your family. So please, like, don't misunderstand that. I understand that there are financial pressures, but that's not often what we're bumping up against when we're coaching. People still feel like they have to find the thing. Find many things. Life is not linear.
Yes, I would absolutely. I love that. I think it's a very excellent point you're making. And I think it goes back to what we were saying at the beginning as well, because when it comes to career, when it comes to success, I think it's important to look at things holistically. We've done a better job, this past years, and like you were saying, COVID has taught a lot of things from that perspective, at looking at things not only in silo, as in how they like cohabitate next to each other, but how they can actually feed one another, whatever sphere we're talking about, in terms of work, in terms of personal life, in terms of health, whatever it is. I think it's all connected to an extent, obviously.
I do. I agree.
And I feel like putting so much pressure, like you were saying, on finding the thing means that your success depends on that one thing, and it shouldn't, because your life is a component of many things that you're bringing together. Obviously, your career and your role and what brings you income is a key component, but the way you can see it should not, like you were saying, involve making the right decision to find the right thing or the thing. It might involve multiple things as well. And I think this is where a lot of people are confused, because for so many years, so many decades, we've imposed a certain definition of what a career would look like in terms of stability, security, where if anything with COVID, we've learned that stability and security can go like this in an instant, right?
In an instant.
So actually, you might as well, in the process of finding something that brings you income, find something that truly matters to you, bring you joy, and where you feel you can make an impact.
I just couldn't agree with that more. And I just think that is one thing I work on with my clients. Like, remote and hybrid is a big thing now, right? Do you want to be in the office full time, or do you need flexibility? So, there's more checks on our checklist now of things that are important to us than there were before.
There are more checks, I would agree with you. And I think the hierarchy has potentially evolved as well. Potentially before, I think one of the priorities was around the job title, whereas potentially the title itself means slightly less if the environment is not like flexible and allowing you, like you were saying, to involve some remote working or whatever example of a criteria there is. But like you said, the checklist is longer, and potentially the hierarchy and priorities have slightly changed for some people as well.
I think for a lot of people, I mean, if you look at the McKinsey report, I know I quote that a lot on my when I get interviewed, but a lot of women left the workforce during COVID because they couldn't do it all, and what was expected of them was, and so we've lost a little ground, I think, for female leadership, and so I really want to see that come back. And since I do work with a lot of female leaders, I want to say that we have choices now. We have more choices, even though the economy won't stay like this.
No.
I mean, that we know. History will tell us. The lemmings have taught us that the economy will not stay like this.
Absolutely. Checking time. We've got 1 more minute to go. Time flies.
I know, it goes by so fast.
It does. Any final thoughts that you want to share with us?
My message to my clients generally is it doesn't need to be so hard.
Oh, I like that.
And I just really want to reiterate that we make it much harder than it has to be. Why are you beating yourself? And by the way, I lost weekends, days, years of my life worrying about things that had already happened. And lately I've been talking a lot about mistakes, right? No one said we have to be perfect. Just last night I was on the phone with somebody and they were like beating themselves up. I shoulda. And I'm like, what did you learn? You can't go back and change that. So message doesn't need to be so hard. Give yourself some grace. We're all human.
I love that. Well, let's finish with that. Thank you so much, Donna, for your time. And thank you
Thank
for
you so
sharing your
much.
journey.
Thank you. And can we tell, I mean, like, you are just a joy to work with. And thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. I didn't pay Donna to say that, everyone listening to this. Thank you so much, Donna, for your time. It was a pleasure to have you.
Thank you.